The great hall of the Lunari Palace was filled with soft blue light. Tall pillars of crystal rose toward a ceiling so high that it seemed to touch the stars themselves. Hundreds of Lunari nobles stood in perfect rows, their silver skin glowing gently in the dim light. They whispered to each other behind long, elegant fingers. And their words were not kind. Una Park stood alone near the entrance. She was small compared to the Lunari, who were all at least 7 feet tall. Her black hair was tied back in a simple knot, and she wore the gray uniform of a human guard. She kept her eyes forward and her face calm. Even though she could feel every stare burning into her skin, she was the first human to serve in the Lunari royal palace. This was supposed to be an honor. But Una knew the truth. She was not here because they wanted her. She was here because of politics, the Galactic Exchange. Program had been created 5 years ago to build peace between species. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago, and many alien races still saw them as primitive. The Lunari were the worst. They believed their telepathic abilities and long lifespans made them better than everyone else. To them, humans were nothing more than clever animals. Una had volunteered for this assignment anyway. She knew it would be hard. She knew they would try to break her, but she also knew that someone had to be first. Someone had to show them that humans were worthy of respect. The whispers grew louder as a door opened at the far end of the hall. Princess Valera entered, surrounded by her personal attendants. She was beautiful in the way that stars were beautiful, bright and cold and impossibly distant. Her skin shone like moonlight, and her eyes were pure silver without any pupils at all. She moved with perfect grace, each step as smooth as water flowing over stone. Una bowed deeply as the princess approached. She had practiced this bow for weeks. Learning the exact angle that showed respect without seeming weak, Princess Valera stopped in front of her. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned to one of her attendants without even looking at Una. "This is the human." Her voice was musical, but filled with disappointment. "I expected something more impressive." The attendant nodded nervously. "Yes, Your Highness. She comes highly recommended by the human military. She has received many honors for her service." "Honors from humans mean nothing," Valera said. She finally looked at Una, and her silver eyes were cold. "Can you even understand me, human? Or do I need to speak more slowly?" Una kept her expression calm. "I understand perfectly, Your Highness. I am here to serve and protect you." "Protect me." Valera laughed, and several nobles joined her. "I have a dozen Lunari guards who can read the minds of any attacker before they even think of striking. What could you possibly offer that they cannot?" Una did not answer. She had learned long ago that some questions were not meant to be answered. They were meant to hurt. Valera seemed annoyed by her silence. "Very well. Follow me, human. Try not to embarrass yourself." The days that followed were difficult. Princess Valera treated Una like she was invisible. She never spoke to her directly. She talked about her as if she were a piece of furniture, commenting on how strange it was to have such an ugly creature following her everywhere. The other Lunari were even worse. They played small, cruel games with her. They would accidentally bump into her in hallways and then act offended that she had touched them. They would speak in the old Lunari language, which Una did not understand, and then laugh at whatever joke they had made at her expense. One night, Una received a message from her brother Taiho. He was a diplomat stationed on another part of the Lunari homeworld, and he had heard about how she was being treated. "They want you to fail," he wrote. "They want you to get angry or cry or do something that proves humans are emotional and unstable. Then they will have an excuse to end the exchange program. Do not give them what they want." Una read the message 3 times. Then she deleted it and went back to her post outside the princess's chambers. She would not break. She would not give them the satisfaction. 2 weeks after her arrival, there was a grand banquet to celebrate some Lunari holiday that Una did not fully understand. The great hall was filled with nobles from across the empire, all of them dressed in flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid light. Una stood against the wall, watching everything, staying alert for any sign of danger. She noticed one of the nobles approaching her. He was tall, even for a Lunar, and his smile was too wide and too sharp. He carried a cup of ceremonial wine, a steaming liquid that smelled like flowers and burning metal. "You must be thirsty," he said loudly so that everyone nearby could hear. "Standing there all night like a statue. Here, let me help you." Before Yuna could react, he stumbled forward and spilled the wine across her arm. The liquid was scalding hot, and she felt her skin burn beneath her uniform. Pain shot through her body like lightning. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to watch. Yuna did not cry out. She did not flinch. She did not even look at the noble who had burned her. Instead, she simply bowed her head, wiped her arm with her other hand, and returned to her position against the wall. The noble looked confused. He had expected a reaction, something he could use against her, but Yuna gave him nothing. "Strange creatures, these humans," he muttered, and walked away. The conversation slowly resumed. The music started playing again. But across the room, Princess Valera was watching. She had seen everything. For a brief moment, something changed in her silver eyes. It was not respect, not admiration, not kindness. It was something smaller and more dangerous. It was curiosity. Later that night, after the banquet ended, Valera called for the palace healer to examine Yuna's arm. The burn was serious, and it would leave a scar. "Why did you not react?" Valera asked as the healer worked. It was the first time she had spoken to Yuna directly in days. Yuna looked at her calmly. "Because that was what he wanted, Your Highness. If I had shown pain, he would have won." "Won what?" "The game," Yuna said simply. "They are all playing a game trying to make me fail. But I did not come here to play games. I came here to do my duty." Valera stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without another word. But Yuna noticed that she looked back once before she left the room. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the wall of contempt that separated them. But Yuna had learned that small things could become big things if you were patient enough. She would be patient. She would endure. And one day, she would show them all what humans were truly made of. The scar on her arm healed slowly over the following weeks. Yuna wore it without shame. It was proof of what she could survive. And in a palace full of people who wanted her to fail, survival was its own kind of victory. 3 weeks had passed since the banquet incident. Yuna's arm had healed, leaving behind a thin white scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. She wore it like a badge of honor, though she never spoke about it. Princess Valera had not changed much. She still ignored Yuna most of the time. She still made cruel comments when her noble friends were around. But sometimes, when no one else was watching, Yuna caught the princess looking at her with that same curious expression. It was not much, but it was something. On the 23rd day of her assignment, Yuna was told that she would accompany Princess Valera to the border moon of Keth. There was a sacred ceremony there. Something to do with the alignment of distant stars? Yuna did not understand the religious significance, but she did not need to. Her job was simple: keep the princess safe. The royal transport ship was beautiful, like everything the Lunari built. It was shaped like a crescent moon, with windows made of crystal that showed the stars in perfect clarity. Inside, everything was soft and comfortable, designed for the pleasure of royalty. 12 Lunari guards were assigned to the journey. They were tall and proud, dressed in silver armor that seemed to flow like water. They looked at Yuna with the same contempt as everyone else. "Try to stay out of the way, human," one of them said. "If there is trouble, we will handle it." "You would only slow us down." Yuna nodded politely and said nothing. She had learned that silence was often the best response. The journey to Keth would take 6 hours. Princess Valera spent most of it in her private chamber, meditating or reading or doing whatever princesses did. Yuna stood outside her door watching and waiting. 3 hours into the journey, the ship shook violently. Alarms began screaming throughout the vessel. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went completely dark. Emergency red lights came on, casting everything in a bloody glow. "What is happening?" One of the Lunari guards shouted. Before anyone could answer, there was a terrible sound of metal tearing. Something had attached itself to the hull of the ship. Something was cutting through. Yuna moved immediately. She ran to the princess's chamber and pushed open the door. Valera was standing in the middle of the room, her silver eyes wide with confusion. "Your Highness, stay close to me," Yuna said firmly. "We are under attack." "Attack? That is impossible. No one would dare attack a royal vessel." But the sounds of battle were already filling the ship. Yuna heard screaming, gunfire, and the heavy footsteps of intruders. She pulled the princess toward the back of the chamber, away from the door. "Void Raiders," Yuna said quietly. She had studied every known threat before taking this assignment. The Void Raiders were pirates who operated in the border regions. They kidnapped nobles and held them for ransom. They were brutal, ruthless, and feared throughout the galaxy. "But the guards," Valera said. "They will stop them. They can read minds. They can predict attacks before they happen." Yuna looked at her seriously. "Your Highness, telepathy requires concentration. Fear destroys concentration. Right now, your guards are probably too terrified to use their abilities." As if to prove her point, there was a scream from the hallway. Then silence. Valera's glowing skin grew pale. For the first time since Yuna had known her, she looked truly afraid. "What do we do?" she whispered. Yuna drew her knife. It was a simple weapon, nothing compared to the energy swords the Lunari guards carried. But it was sharp, and she knew how to use it. "We survived," she said. The door to the chamber burst open. 3 Void Raiders rushed in, their weapons raised. They were ugly creatures, covered in thick gray scales and wearing mismatched armor stolen from a dozen different species. The first raider saw Yuna and laughed. A human. "This will be easy." He was wrong. Yuna moved faster than anyone expected. She ducked under his swing, drove her knife into the soft spot beneath his arm, and twisted. He fell with a gurgling cry. Before his body hit the ground, she had already turned to face the second raider. He was bigger and stronger. He swung a massive club toward her head. Yuna dropped low, feeling the wind of the weapon passing inches above her hair. She kicked out, hitting his knee. Something cracked. He stumbled, and she was on him in an instant, her knife finding his throat. The third raider tried to run. Yuna threw her knife. It spun through the air and buried itself in his back. He collapsed in the doorway. Everything had taken less than 10 seconds. Yuna retrieved her knife and wiped it clean. Her breathing was steady. Her hands did not shake. She turned back to Princess Valera, who was staring at her with an expression Yuna had never seen before. It was shock. It was awe. It was the sudden understanding that everything she had believed about humans was wrong. "Stay here," Yuna said. "I need to check the rest of the ship." She moved through the corridors like a ghost. The emergency lights painted everything in red, and shadows stretched like living things. She found more raiders moving in groups of 2 or 3, searching for the princess. They did not find her. They found Yuna instead. She killed them quickly and quietly. Each fight was short and brutal. The raiders were strong, but they were not trained soldiers. They relied on fear and numbers. Yuna relied on skill and discipline. By the time she had swept through the main sections of the ship, 8 raiders were dead by her hand. She found the Lunari guards huddled in the security room, too frightened to fight. Their silver armor was unstained. Their energy swords had never been drawn. "The ship is almost clear," Yuna told them. "There may be more raiders near the hull breach. Rescue should arrive soon." The guards stared at her in disbelief. One of them tried to say something, but no words came out. Yuna returned to the princess's chamber. For more raiders had found their way there while she was gone. They were all unconscious on the floor, taken down by Yuna's quick and careful traps. Princess Valera was exactly where Yuna had left her. Pressed against the wall, her silver eyes reflecting the red emergency lights, Yuna stood in front of her, knife in hand, watching the door. "Rescue will arrive in 6 minutes," she said calmly. "You are safe, Your Highness." Valera could not speak. She could only stare at the small human woman who had just saved her life. Her telepathy, which usually let her read the thoughts and emotions of everyone around her, could not touch Yuna's mind. It was like trying to reach through a wall of solid stone. "Who are you?" She wanted to ask, "What are you?" But she said nothing. She just watched as Yuna stood guard, patient and still, waiting for help to arrive. When the rescue team finally reached the ship, they found 17 raiders neutralized. 8 were dead. 9 were unconscious. And 1 small human guard was standing in front of the princess, ready to fight anyone who came through the door. Commander Doenbeek read the report 3 times before he believed it. Then he smiled and shook his head. "That is our Yuna," he said quietly. "That is what humans can do." The story spread quickly through the Lunari Palace. A single human guard had done what 12 Lunari warriors could not. She had faced the darkness without fear. She had killed without hesitation. And she had protected her princess with her life. No one laughed at Yuna anymore. No one spilled wine on her or bumped into her in hallways. Now, when she walked through the palace, they stepped aside and watched her pass in silence, and Princess Valera watched too with new eyes. Seeing the human guard for the first time, the palace was different after the attack. Or perhaps the palace was the same, and it was the people inside it who had changed. Yuna stood at her usual post outside Princess Valera's chambers. Her wounds from the fight had been treated, and the healers had been surprised by how quickly her body was recovering. Humans, they learned, were remarkably good at healing. The servants no longer avoided her eyes. The nobles no longer made cruel jokes when she passed. Some of them even nodded at her with something that looked almost like respect. But it was Princess Valera who had changed the most. She no longer pretended that Yuna did not exist. She acknowledged her with small gestures, a nod of the head, a brief moment of eye contact. She stopped making cruel comments, even when her friends expected her to. And sometimes, late at night, Yuna could hear her pacing in her chambers, unable to sleep. 3 nights after the attack, the princess called for her. Yuna entered the chamber and found Valera standing by the window, looking out at the stars. Her skin was glowing softly as it always did, but there was something tired in the way she held herself. "You wanted to see me, Your Highness?" Valera did not turn around. "I cannot sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see those creatures breaking through the door. I see their weapons. I see their faces." Yuna stood quietly, waiting. She understood trauma. She had seen it many times in her years as a soldier. "But then I see something else," Valera continued. "I see you, standing between me and death, moving so fast that my eyes could barely follow, killing them like it was nothing." She finally turned to face Yuna. Her silver eyes were filled with emotions that Yuna could not quite read. "Why did you save me?" The question hung in the air between them. "It was my duty, Your Highness." "Duty?" Valera's voice was sharp. "Do not give me that simple answer. My people have treated you like an animal since you arrived. I have treated you like something beneath my notice. You owe me nothing. You owe us nothing. So why did you risk your life for mine?" Yuna considered the question carefully. She could give the easy answer again, the safe answer. But something told her that the princess deserved more than that. Because it was the right thing to do, she finally said, "Because you needed help, and I was there to help you." That is what being a guard means. It does not matter if you like me. It does not matter if you respect me. When danger comes, I stand between you and that danger. That is who I am. Valera stared at her for a long moment. "I have seen our guards. The Lunary warriors who are supposed to protect me. They serve out of fear or ambition. They want rewards, promotions, favor from my mother. But you want nothing. I want to do my job well. That is not the same as wanting nothing." Valera moved closer, studying Yuna's face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You are strange human. I've tried to read your mind many times since we met. But your thoughts are hidden from me. Your mind is like a wall." Yuna almost smiled. "My people call it discipline. We cannot block telepathy, but we can learn to control our thoughts, to keep them quiet and still." "Why would you need such a skill?" "Because we grew up in a universe that was not kind to us," Yuna said. "Humans have faced many challenges: wars, disasters, hunger, disease. We learned that survival requires control of our bodies, of our emotions, of our minds. Valera sat down slowly, her legs folding beneath her with elegant grace. She gestured for Yuna to sit as well. It was the first time she had ever treated Yuna as an equal. Yuna hesitated for a moment, then sat across from her. "Tell me about your world," Valera said. "Tell me about Earth." So Yuna talked. She talked about the blue oceans and green forests. She talked about the cities that stretched toward the sky and the villages that hid in quiet valleys. She talked about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity and the peace that had finally brought them together. "We fought each other for thousands of years," Yuna said. "We divided ourselves by country, by religion, by the color of our skin. We killed millions of our own kind. We almost ended our entire species. That sounds terrible. But we survived. We learned. We looked up at the stars and realized that our differences did not matter. We were all human. We were all alone in the universe. And if we wanted to survive what was out there, we had to work together." Valera listened in silence. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the starlight from the window. "My people think humans are weak," she said quietly. "We live for thousands of years. We can read minds and move objects with our thoughts. Compared to us, humans seem so fragile, so temporary." "We're temporary," Yuna agreed. "Most humans only live for 100 years, if we are lucky. We know that our time is short. Maybe that is why we try so hard to make it mean something." "What do you mean?" Yuna looked out at the stars. "The Lunari have thousands of years to make their mark on the universe. Humans do not. So we burn brighter. We work harder. We love deeper. We fight with everything we have because we know we do not have time to waste." Valera was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I have never thought about it that way. I've always seen your short lives as a weakness, a sign that your species is inferior. Many species see it that way," Yuna said without bitterness. "They look at us and see animals that live fast and die young. But I think our short lives are what make us strong. We know that every moment matters. We know that we cannot wait forever to do what is right." The princess looked at her guard with new understanding. She had spent her whole life being taught that the Lunari were the greatest species in the galaxy, that their telepathy, their beauty, their long lives made them superior to everyone else. But sitting here, talking to this small human woman with the quiet voice and the steady eyes, she was beginning to doubt everything she had been taught. "You have given me much to think about," Valera said finally. Yuna stood and bowed. "I should return to my post, Your Highness." "Wait," Valera hesitated, as if struggling with something inside herself. "I am sorry. For how I treated you when you first arrived? For the cruel things I said. I was wrong." The words seemed to cost her something. Lunari princesses did not apologize. They did not admit mistakes. But Valera said the words anyway. Yuna looked at her calmly. "Thank you, Your Highness. That means more than you know." She returned to her post outside the door. But something had changed between them. The wall of contempt that had separated them was cracking. And through those cracks, something new was beginning to grow. It was not friendship, not yet. But it was the beginning of understanding. In the days that followed, the late-night conversations continued. Valera would call for Yuna when she could not sleep, and they would talk for hours about their different worlds. Yuna learned about the pressure of being a princess in an empire that demanded perfection. Valera learned about the struggles of being human in a galaxy that saw her kind as primitive. They were different in almost every way. But in the quiet hours of the night, those differences did not seem to matter, and slowly, one conversation at a time, the princess and the guard began to see each other as something more than what they had been taught to see. Queen Soleth watched her daughter from across the throne room. Her silver eyes were cold and calculating, like chips of frozen starlight. She had ruled the Lunari Empire for 800 years, and in all that time, she had never seen anything as troubling as what she was seeing now. Her youngest daughter, Princess Valera, was changing. She smiled more often. She spent less time with the noble families and more time in quiet corners of the palace. And worst of all, She had developed what could only be called affection for the human guard. This could not be allowed to continue. The queen summoned her most trusted advisor, an ancient Lunari named Lord Hune. He was thin and pale, even by Lunari standards, and his mind was as sharp as a blade. "The human is becoming a problem," the queen said simply. Lord Hayan nodded slowly. "I have noticed, Your Majesty. The princess speaks highly of her. Too highly. The other nobles are beginning to talk. Talking is not the problem. The problem is what comes after talking. If a Lunari princess can respect a human, others might follow. Our entire social order is built on the belief that we are superior to all other species. One human guard could destroy centuries of tradition." "What would you have me do, Your Majesty?" The queen's lips curved into a cold smile. "Remove her. But do it in a way that makes the princess hate her. I do not want Valera mourning. I want her to feel betrayed." Lord Hayan bowed deeply. "It will be done." The trap was set carefully over the following weeks. False communications were created, messages that seemed to show Yuna sending secret information to human intelligence agencies. Financial records were forged, showing payments into hidden accounts. Every piece of evidence was crafted to look completely real. Yuna noticed nothing wrong. She continued her duties, standing guard outside the princess's chambers. Walking beside her through the palace gardens, staying alert for any sign of danger, she did not know that the greatest danger was already inside the palace walls. The accusation came during a high council meeting. Yuna was summoned to appear before the queen and her advisors. She walked into the great hall and saw dozens of Lunari nobles staring at her with cold satisfaction. Princess Valera stood near her mother's throne, her face pale and confused. "Yuna Park," the queen said, her voice echoing through the chamber, "you stand accused of espionage against the Lunari Empire. Evidence has been found proving that you have been transmitting our military secrets to human agencies. The punishment for this crime is death." The words hit Yuna like a physical blow. For a moment, she could not breathe. Then her training took over, and she forced herself to remain calm. "Your Majesty, I have done no such thing. I am loyal to my assignment. I would never betray the trust that has been placed in me. The evidence says otherwise." The queen waved her hand, and holographic displays appeared in the air, showing the forged messages and financial records. "These communications were recovered from your personal terminal. These payments were traced to accounts in your name. Do you deny that these are yours?" Yuna looked at the evidence. It was perfect. Whoever had created it had done their work well. She could see no obvious flaws, no easy way to prove her innocence. "I deny everything," she said firmly. "This evidence is false. I did not send these messages. I did not receive these payments. Someone is trying to destroy me." The nobles laughed. They had been waiting for this moment since the human arrived. Finally, they would be rid of her. "Lies," Lord Hayan said smoothly. "The evidence is clear. The human has betrayed us. She must face justice." Guards moved forward to seize Yuna. She did not resist. She knew that fighting would only make things worse. It would prove what they already believed about humans. They were violent and dangerous. They grabbed her roughly, forcing her to her knees. One of them struck her across the face. Blood dripped from her lip, but she made no sound. Princess Valera watched in horror. Her mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. She looked at the evidence, then at Yuna, then at her mother, and suddenly, she understood. She remembered a conversation from years ago, when her mother had explained how to deal with threats to the Empire. Sometimes the best way to destroy an enemy is to make them destroy themselves. Create evidence. Control the story. Make everyone believe what you want them to believe. This was not justice. This was assassination disguised as law, no, Valera said. The hall fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her. "What did you say?" the queen asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Valera stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "I said no. I do not believe this evidence. I do not believe Yuna is a spy. The evidence is clear, daughter. The evidence is too clear. Valera looked at the holographic displays with new eyes. It is too perfect. Every piece supports the accusation. There are no contradictions, no mistakes, no loose ends. Real evidence is never this clean. This was manufactured, the nobles began to whisper. This was not what they had expected. You are young and naive, the queen said coldly. You have allowed yourself to be deceived by this human. She has manipulated your emotions and clouded your judgment. No, mother. My judgment has never been clearer. Valera raised her chin, meeting her mother's eyes without fear. I invoke the right of truth. A gasp went through the chamber. The right of truth was an ancient Lunari law, older than the Empire itself. It demanded telepathic verification of all accusations. But it also exposed the accuser to the same scrutiny. If the evidence was false, those who created it would be revealed. The queen's face went pale with rage. She could not refuse without admitting that she had something to hide. And she could not accept without risking exposure. You would use such a sacred right to protect a human, she hissed. I would use it to protect the truth, Valera replied. Is that not what the law demands? For a long moment, mother and daughter stared at each other. The entire hall held its breath. Finally, the queen nodded stiffly. Very well. Let the right of truth be invoked. The telepathic probe was conducted by the High Oracle, an ancient Lunari who served no political master. She touched the minds of everyone involved, searching for truth among the lies. It did not take long. The evidence was false. The messages had been created by Lord Hand's servants. The financial records had been forged by experts in the queen's employ. Several nobles had known about the conspiracy and supported it. Yuna was innocent. The hall erupted in chaos. The conspirators tried to flee, but the guards caught them. Lord Hen was dragged before the oracle, his crimes laid bare for everyone to see. The queen sat on her throne, her face a mask of cold fury. She had been outmaneuvered by her own daughter. She had been humiliated in front of the entire court. And worst of all, the human was still alive. Yuna was released. She stood slowly, wiping the blood from her face. Her body ached from the guards' rough treatment, but she said nothing about the pain. Princess Valera rushed to her side. Are you all right? Did they hurt you badly? I am fine, Your Highness. Yuna looked at the princess with gratitude that went beyond words. You saved my life. You saved mine first. I was only returning the favor. That night, after the conspirators had been taken away and the court had dispersed in shock, Valera visited Yuna in the medical wing. The human guard was lying on a bed while healers treated her injuries. Could have exposed them yourself, Valera said quietly. Your brother is a diplomat. You had resources, connections. You could have fought back. Yuna shook her head slowly. If I had fought, they would have used it as proof that humans are aggressive and dangerous. They would have turned my resistance into a weapon against my people. So you did nothing? You let them beat you? I endured. Yuna looked at her with calm, steady eyes. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive. To show them that no matter what they do to you, they cannot break you. Alira sat beside the bed, her luminescent hand reaching out to touch Yuna's bruised fingers. I was wrong about your kind, she said softly. I was wrong about you. I have spent my whole life being taught that humans were inferior, primitive, beneath our notice. But you have shown me that true strength has nothing to do with telepathy or long life. True strength is the will to do what is right, even when it costs you everything. Yuna smiled faintly. It was the first time Valera had seen her smile. Thank you, Your Highness. Call me Valera, the princess said. I think we have moved beyond formality. And in that quiet moment, in the medical wing of a palace that had tried to destroy her, Yuna finally allowed herself to hope that things might actually change. 6 months had passed since the trial that changed everything. The conspirators had been exiled to distant colonies on the edge of Lunari space. Lord Hyun had been stripped of his titles and sent to a prison moon where he would spend the rest of his long life in darkness. Queen Solith had not been punished directly, but everyone knew she had been involved. Her power was weakened, her reputation damaged. She spent most of her time now in her private chambers, refusing to see visitors. and Una Park was still standing guard outside Princess Valera's door. Her assignment was supposed to end after 6 months. That was the agreement with the Galactic Exchange Program. But when the time came, Valera submitted a formal request to extend Una's placement. Then another extension, and another. Finally, she did something that shocked the entire empire. She petitioned to make Una her permanent personal guard. The court was scandalized. Nobles, who had remained silent after the trial, suddenly found their voices again. This was too far, they said. A human serving as the permanent protector of a Lunari princess was an insult to their entire civilization. Queen Soleth emerged from her chambers to oppose the petition personally. She stood before the High Council, her silver robes flowing like liquid moonlight, and spoke with all the authority she could muster. "This is madness," she declared. "My daughter has been corrupted by this human. She has forgotten who she is, what she represents. A Lunari princess does not need protection from a creature who will be dead in a few decades. This petition must be denied." The council members nodded and murmured their agreement. The queen still had allies, still had power. It seemed certain that the petition would fail. Then Valera stood to speak. She was different than she had been 6 months ago. There was a confidence in her posture, a clarity in her silver eyes that had not been there before. She looked at the council, at her mother, at the nobles who had tried to destroy the woman she now trusted with her life, and she spoke. "You call this madness? You say I have been corrupted, but I say I have been awakened." Her voice rang through the chamber like a bell. "For centuries, we Lunari have believed that we are the greatest species in the galaxy. We point to our telepathy, our beauty, our long lives as proof of our superiority. We look at other species and see only weakness." She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. "But I have learned something these past months. I have learned that true strength cannot be measured by the abilities you are born with. It cannot be measured by how long you live, or how many minds you can read. True strength is measured by what you do when everything is against you, by how you act when no one is watching, by the choices you make when those choices cost you everything." She turned to look at Una, who stood quietly near the door, watching without expression. "This woman saved my life when our own guards were too frightened to fight. She stood alone against 17 raiders and defeated them all. When she was falsely accused and beaten, she did not resist. She did not complain. She endured because she knew that fighting back would harm her people." Valera's voice grew stronger, filled with emotion that surprised even herself. "She is the finest warrior I have ever known. She possesses an honor that would shame half this court. And she has shown me that strength is not measured by telepathy or longevity. It is measured by the will to protect others at any cost." The chamber was completely silent. No one dared to speak. "I do not ask you to change your beliefs about humans. I do not ask you to love them or accept them as equals. I only ask you to look at this one woman and see what I see. See her courage. See her discipline. See her heart." She turned back to face the council. "I want her as my guard, not because I am corrupted, but because I am finally seeing clearly. And if you cannot understand that, then perhaps it is you who needs to open your eyes." She sat down. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, council members began to vote. The petition passed by a margin of 3 votes. Una Park became the first human to hold a permanent position in the Lunari royal court. That night, after the council had dispersed and the palace had grown quiet, Valera found Una in the observatory. It was a beautiful room at the top of the highest tower, with a domed ceiling made entirely of crystal. The stars seemed close enough to touch. Una was standing at the window, looking out at the galaxy she had traveled so far to reach. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. "The speech, the petition. You made enemies today. I made them long ago, when I chose to defend you at the trial." Valera stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "At least now they know where I stand." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars drift slowly across the crystal ceiling. "My people lived for thousands of years," Valera said finally. We think this makes us superior. We think it gives us wisdom, perspective, understanding that shorter-lived species could never achieve. She turned to look at Yuna, and her silver eyes were soft in a way they had never been before. But humans live so briefly, and yet you shine so bright. You accomplish more in a single lifetime than many Lunari accomplish in 10. You love so deeply, fight so fiercely, hope so stubbornly. It is as if knowing that your time is short makes every moment more precious. Yuna finally looked at her. We do what we can with the time we have. That is all anyone can do. I have never met anyone like you, Yuna Park. Valera's voice was barely above a whisper. You asked nothing from me? You expected nothing. And yet you gave everything. Your service. Your protection. Your trust. She reached out and took Yuna's hand in her own. The princess's fingers were long and luminescent, glowing faintly within her light. Yuna's were short and calloused, marked by years of training and battle. Together, they looked like two different worlds trying to connect.